As we continue to unpack BlizzCon 2023, I came across this interview from Digitaltrends where they interviewed the Diablo 4 dev team, specifically Rod Ferguson and Chris Wilson. There's a lot being said in this interview, and I want to dive deep into it and explain what it means for Diablo 4's future. I hope you'll stick around and join me. We'll see you on the other side. So there's a lot to unpack in this interview. We'll try to take it bits and pieces. Basically, Digitaltrends sat down with Chris Wilson and Rod Ferguson at BlizzCon 2023, and basically they wanted to understand everything that goes on with creating a game, obviously, and a live service. And they talked about some pretty revealing things, and also something was confirmed, because I know there's still a debate out there on whether or not the expansion is going to be, we're going to have to pay for it, or if it's going to be free. Now, the majority of the player base, of course, wants the expansion to be free. But it's discussed in this interview, so let's get to it. First of all, I noticed that Rod Ferguson has had a shift. Well, he's had many shifts, and I'll explain. So if you remember in the past, Rod Ferguson, in many interviews, stated that, you know, Diablo 4 is a live service. There's seasons, and the seasons are meant to jump in and jump out of, right? So kind of, I got the impression that he thought that players would not be, playing the whole season. Now, remember, this was a time when he said this, that the game was in a really bad state. So he kind of was justifying, in a wrong way, in my opinion, why the player base had left. And his reaction to that was, well, there's seasons, and seasons, players come, and when they're done with the season, they leave. So kind of justifying why players are leaving, right? And not accepting the fact that players were leaving because the game was bad. Well, in this interview, he says if it's a different season every 2 weeks and you're just dialed to 11 all the time, your eyes will start to bleed. Ferguson tells Digitaltrends, having a little bit of a valley there before you go to the next peak can be kind of refreshing and get you energized for the next thing. We want people to play all the way through. We want people to be there for 12 weeks. And that's why we're having more and more content. But that's not to say we won't change in the future. So I immediately noticed the shift in his mentality when it comes to how he described the player base would be playing seasons. In the past, he said they come and go. When they're done with it, they leave. So, and now he's saying that they want the player base to be there for the full 12 weeks. So you're going to notice a trend in this interview. If you've kept up with all my videos and you've followed the story of Diablo 4, you will notice a lot of stark differences in the mind shift and the change in the Diablo 4 dev team. Okay, the other thing I wanted to mention was that they discussed the live service growing pains. And the interviewer said that Diablo 4 had the biggest launch in Blizzard's history, but one of the first updates was its most controversial. And we know which patch we're talking about. The infamous patch, there you go, and made leveling a slower process. Figures Ferguson attributes some of those mistakes to the team trying too hard to perfectly balance the game so that every build was viable. So every build being viable was nerf them all to the ground. And no players or builds got too overpowered as Diablo 4's live service updates began. Now he says the team made a design philosophy change into being less aggressive towards updates like that as Season 2 rolls out. So, guys, confirmed the micromanaging those days, the 18 patches in the first 2 months of the game, or sorry, month and a half of the game. Hopefully, as we can see here, those days are gone. Hallelujah. We recognize that maybe we were a little aggressive in terms of trying to get that balance, but it was coming at the cost of some players' fun. No kidding. Ferguson explained, in Season 2, we have similar outliers. Ball lightning is a very powerful build right now. That's more powerful than other builds. I think if we had the same Season 1 philosophy, we would have tempered that down pretty quickly. But with Season 2, we're recognizing it's more about player fun than trying to get this perfectly balanced game. How about that? Prioritizing fun. Great. They get it now, guys. In general, Ferguson and Wilson seem pleased with how Season 2 has gone and all the content that they still have in store for it. They think that coupled with better communication with the game's fan base is allowing them to be much more reactive to what players want and desires instead of having blind faith in an update players may despise. With Season 1, we were wrapping up development of that season right before the game came out. Wilson told Digitaltrends the game hadn't come out yet, so we didn't really have a chance to take stock of what players might want that wasn't in the game yet, and so forth. I'm excited that with Season 2, we were able to land a lot of the quality of life improvements and things that players are asking for. And again, hallelujah. And I spoke about this in my previous video. There has been a noticeable shift in the mentality of how this game is being managed. Okay? It looks like micromanagement is a thing of the past. Thank God. Okay? Too many hands in the cookie jar is not good, and constantly micromanaging a game sucks the life out of it. So applause to Rod Ferguson and Chris Wilson for acknowledging this and stating that they did micromanage the game, and now they're going to do less of that. And the other thing that is glaring here, and another positive, another W for this game, and why I'm optimistic about the future, is that what this just said, okay? In the past, like they just said in this article, they launched Season 1 without any feedback. And although they did get feedback with the pre-launch, prior to the launch, remember, I've said this already 3 or 4 times now, they had a selected few players, I think it was 25 of them, that played the game for a month prior to launch for feedback. And they received feedback and nothing was done. And actually, one of the players that was part of that group commented on my video and said, I can confirm that we were told to give feedback. We did give feedback and nothing was done. So another shift in how things are being done, another W in this new mindset with the Diablo 4 team. They recognize that them implementing stuff without getting feedback didn't work. And now they want to give themselves room to breathe and set up the way they're implementing the game and developing the game and updating the game, giving themselves breathing space in order to react to what's being said by the community and the player base, so they can decide whether or not to implement and put that in the game. Again, another W. That's another huge W because it represents 2 things. Number one, they're listening to the feedback, and potentially that feedback could get implemented in the game. That's W number 1. W number 2, they're strategically planning things with space and room to be able to implement these things. Another W, because that kind of strategy allows you the maneuverability to implement changes that are positive for the game. So huge W. The interview goes on to talk about, the vessel of hatred. And it's confirmed. And I hate to tell you, because this is a question that gets asked a lot in my comments section on my videos whenever the discussion of expansions for Diablo 4, guys. 200%, it's not going to be free. Rod Ferguson confirms it in this interview at BlizzCon 2023. He basically has said, and you'll understand why I made that comment. All these learnings are things that developers will have to keep in mind as they work not just on Season 3, but all the 2024 seasons and the Vessel of Hatred expansion. Regarding the expansion specifically, Ferguson recognizes that it could appeal more to new players or those more interested in the story rather than the broader live service. Still, he admits Blizzard will have to find a way for all those different kinds of players to be addressed in tandem as the team explores how season expansions for Diablo will interplay. Seasons are free and expansions are not. Confirmed. The expansion is not going to be free, guys. We have it right here in black and white. Seasons are free, expansions are not. So you don't want to get into the haves and have-nots and the notion of we have this cool thing, but you can't play because you can't buy the expansion, Ferguson said. There will be seasonal play and expansion play. We want to make sure that the people who are playing seasonal and don't want to play the expansion are fine, and the people that get the expansion have new experiences they get from that. So this reveals two things. Okay? This reveals that, number one, the expansion is not going to be free. 200% confirmed it's going to be a paid service. This also confirms that the Diablo 4 dev team is currently trying to understand and figure out how they're going to maintain the live service when the expansion comes out, Vessel of Hatred. When it comes out late 2024, they now are going to have 2 lanes, and they use the term swimming lanes, right? They're going to have 2 lanes, the people that don't buy the expansion and the people that buy the expansion, and how they're going to maneuver that new landscape is very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see how they navigate that issue, right? Because you're going to have the player base that's not going to feel like, no, this game took forever to get here to this point, and as far as I'm concerned, they should have given it to us for free, or they just don't want to give Blizzard Activision King another penny, whatever the case may be, right? So they're not going to buy the expansion. So how are they going to treat those players? How is that going to be implemented in game? Are they going to have their own realm, right? So is the Eternal Realm now going to be the non-seasonal realm? Like, I'm just thinking off the top of my head as I read this for the first time. And then, of course, you'll have the seasonal and expansion lane. How's that? That player base that's going to play every season, buy every expansion, how's that going to work? How's it going to work for players that come in and out of seasons, come in and out of expansions? It's a very complicated puzzle, and how that's going to be handled, and again, they refer it to as swimming lanes, is going to be very interesting for how the future of Diablo 4 will set up. But the main takeaway from this, expansions are not going to be free. It's for, you take it right out of the mouth of Rod Ferguson in this interview. The making of Vessel of Hatred, they spoke about that. We know that Vessel of Hatred will take players to Curacao from Diablo 2. And Mephisto's in it. It will add a new class to the game and explore themes of nature, taking back what people have taken from it. Ferguson was hesitant to draw any comparison between Vessel of Hatred's scope and that of Diablo 3, Reaper of Souls. When the interviewer asked how Diablo 4's expansion size compares to Reaper of Souls, He stressed that Blizzard wants the scope to be such that there's value there that makes sense for you to want to be able to buy it. Again, that's twice now that he says it's going to cost money. Ferguson says that's why when it comes with a new region and why players will be able to take its fully fleshed out new class and other elements from the expansion back into the main Diablo 4 game. It's shaping up to be the biggest addition to Diablo 4 live service yet, fitting for an expansion, but Blizzard is already preparing for what's beyond that. Blizzard teased to Digitaltrends during the interview that Diablo 4 will get multiple expansions, unlike Diablo 3. So another big W, guys, confirmed by the head of Diablo 4 development team himself. Diablo 4 is going to get multiple expansions. Double U. Vessel of Hatred will not be the end of the live service support. With seasons continuing on after it launches next year, that seems quite overwhelming, but Ferguson offered insight into how the team is structured into swim lanes to accommodate these live service developments. There are currently teams to handle day-to-day balancing, odd number seasons, even number seasons, Vessel of Hatred, and the development of Diablo 4's second expansion. So again, we already know, right? 9,000 people, and they have a team for the live service. They have a team for even number seasons. They have a team looking at odd number seasons. They have a team now looking at working on the expansion, Vessel of Hatred, and they have another development team already working on the second expansion, right? You can't build it serially. You have to build it parallel, Ferguson says. The trick for us is having the right pipeline and processes, but also the right team size so that it's sustainable. The people aren't burning the candle on both ends, that we're able to keep all these work streams going without having to push too hard. That's been exciting as we're settling into that. That's been the transition of going from launching Diablo 4 into the live service, really being able to fill those 5 work streams and being able to make it sustainable. And I'm going to dive into a little bit of this in a little bit, okay? They went on to go talk about what comes next for Diablo 4, and they talked about sustainability and safety in the workplace. For those of you that don't know, the prior game director of Diablo 4 was fired in 2021 for reportedly workplace harassment at Blizzard. So the company is still dealing with that. And, you know, they have a return to office policy. And there's a lot of things that was discussed about that whole thing. And I don't really want to get into that. What I do want to get is another thing that Rod said, and that is we're fully integrated. The team is supporting every facet of Diablo 4. All the different swim lanes Rob mentioned, there are people in Albany supporting that. It's not restricted to only doing one part of it, Wilson says. The Albany team helped do a lot of work on Diablo 2 Resurrected. Hey, Albany, good jobs. You guys did a good job. And that really helps us develop and get our feet under us for being part of the Diablo team. It's a fully integrated cross-coast team. One of the things we want to be able to do is hear the feedback on this expansion to help inform expansion 2. With so many, I'm gonna dive into that. With so many teams working on so much Diablo 4 content in parallel, there will be likely a few gaps in its live service support for the foreseeable future, outside of the intentional lulls Ferguson alluded to. Vessel of Hatred seems like it'll arrive almost a year and a half after the launch of Diablo 4, and because Blizzard is already working on the second expansion, I asked if there will just be as long as a gap between the first and second expansion. Ferguson was clear that the timing of the second expansion is yet to be decided, and as Blizzard has with other aspects of Diablo 4's post-launch support, it will be very reactive to player feedback. I like to say there's a lot that can happen in game development, and so the notion of trying to call your shots too early, what is it? The best laid plans of mice and men? Because we're developing in parallel. We have to get going, but the idea of what exactly that release cadence is going to be, That's to be determined. Expansion 1 is coming late next year, and then we'll see. The other part of it is we're continually getting feedback, right? And one of the things we want to be able to do is hear the feedback on this expansion to help inform expansion 2. We don't want to be so close together, so tight, that we're unable to react to the feedback. So that's another thing to take into account. Guys, I called it. I said it in a previous video. There has been a mind shift in this development team, and you just heard it through this interview, where they have acknowledged in the past they would have done things to get things out quickly and think that they were doing good without listening to feedback or having enough time to get feedback, and then implementing things and it falling dead on arrival and really upsetting the player base. This was how things were done in the past. Season 1. That's your poster boy for how not to do things, right? The game was launched and season 1 was already done. No room for feedback or changes, right? They were actually almost done testing season 1 when they launched the game. This is now the new way of doing things in Diablo 4. And let me tell you, this is the biggest W to date. The fact that they have publicly stated this is a huge step forward, okay? They have realized their way was the wrong way. And the new way is give ourselves room to breathe. Don't overcommit. This is why we didn't get too much detail, and we're not getting too much detail about the big ticket items that this game has to tackle. Like, this is, and give yourself enough room to react to the feedback that you're receiving and put it into the game. www. Right? This spells www.fun.com. I just made that up. This is amazing. I'm super positive about this. They are finally getting it. This is how you manage a game, how you develop a game, in my opinion. The fact that they are going to be listening to the player base and setting up processes in their development of the game that allows enough time to hear the feedback and implement the feedback. Bravo. Bravo. This is great. The only bad thing that came out of this interview was a lot of people are going to be upset with the fact that Rod Ferguson confirmed that the expansion is going to cost money. I know in my comment section of my YouTube videos that a lot of people are expecting the expansion to be free. And hell, even though he said this, the one thing we're learning is they will change their mind dependent on the feedback they're getting. But I know a lot of people that have put comments in my videos on YouTube that they will not buy the expansion or play the expansion unless it's free. So only time will tell how this issue gets revealed and how the player base is going to react to it. But I just wanted to share this interview with you from Digitaltrends. I'm going to put the full article. I'll provide the link in the description on my video. And there's some revealing things. I think a lot of W's. Some might, obviously, a lot of people are going to see an L on the fact that the expansion is for sure going to cost the player base money. So that obviously is going to be an L for a lot of people or some people. But anyway, I just wanted to share this new information. And again, it's a W. This is how they need to manage the game. Player feedback should be paramount and the top of the list when it comes to developing a game. So bravo, the fact that they finally acknowledged it and realized it. Okay, that'll do it, everyone. Thanks for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you can find it in your heart to like, comment, and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. We got a nice little community that we're building here, and someone in the community has named it the Caps Waypoint. So I keep referring to that, the Caps Waypoint. So hit that subscribe button. Join us at the Caps Waypoint. We'd love to have you. It's a fun, supportive community. They're always debating stuff. So hit that subscribe button. Come and join us. We'd love to have you. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.